Montana Territory. 1883. The wind was howling through the cottonwoods when Joanna Pierce stepped off the eastbound stage at the edge of Elkhorn Ridge, dragging behind her a worn satchel in one hand and a girl with tangled curls in the other. The little girl, Lily, looked up at her mother with wide, silent eyes. Her tiny fingers gripped Joanna's coat sleeve like she was afraid the wind might take her too. Joanna squared her shoulders and ignored the stares from the townsfolk. A widow with a child and no husband in sight, people always looked. She kept walking. The stagecoach kicked up dust as it rolled away, leaving them standing beside the general store. Joanna glanced up at the gray sky, then down at Lily. "We'll find somewhere warm," she said, her voice calm, steady. She had no plan past that. The town was small, mostly dirt roads, a post office, a saloon, and a livery. Beyond that, open land stretched out in all directions, dotted with low hills and broken fences. She had chosen Elkhorn Ridge because it was far, quiet, and no one knew her here. That was enough. Inside the store, the bell above the door jingled. A man behind the counter glanced up from a ledger. "Mornin'." "Mornin'," Joanna replied, brushing snow off her coat. "Do you know if there's any work in town?" The man scratched at his jaw. "You got a trade?" "No, sir. I can read and write." "I can mend. I've worked in kitchens." She didn't offer more. She never did unless asked. He looked down at Lily. "That your girl?" "Yes." He nodded slowly, then turned to the window. "See that ranch house up yonder, the one past the church?" Joanna followed his gaze. A long, wide house stood past the edge of town, set against a backdrop of pine trees and rising hills. "Quinn O'Connell owns it," the man said. "Drives cattle. Works alone now, mostly. Lost his brother in the war and never took to town life after. You might try there, he's fair." "Quiet." Joanna gave a small nod. "Thank you." She and Lily walked the mile to the ranch house with snow biting at their cheeks and boots crunching over frozen ground. The house was weathered but sturdy, with smoke curling from the chimney and rows of chopped wood stacked neatly by the porch. Joanna knocked. The door opened, and a tall man stood there, broad shoulders, wool coat, and eyes the color of river stone. He looked at her, then at Lily. He said nothing for a long moment. "I am not asking for charity," Joanna said. "Just work." "I do not need much." He looked past her at the empty road, then stepped aside. "Come in." The warmth inside the house met her like a wave. Lily clung to her skirt. "I am Joanna Pierce," she said quietly. "This is my daughter, Lily. We came from Kansas." "I am Quinn O'Connell." She waited, but he did not ask questions. "I can cook, clean." "I do not need that," he interrupted. His voice was calm. "I do not ask women to work for their keep." Joanna hesitated. "Then why let us in?" Quinn glanced at Lily. "Because it is snowing, and she is cold." Joanna lowered her eyes. "We can find somewhere else tomorrow. I did not ask you to leave," he said. She looked up. He crossed the room, opened a trunk, and pulled out a folded quilt. "There is a spare room down the hall. It is not much, but it is dry and warm." Joanna took the quilt with trembling hands. "Thank you." Lily was asleep within the hour, curled up beneath the quilt in the quiet room. Joanna stood by the stove in the kitchen, watching the flames dance behind the iron grate. Quinn sat at the table, nursing a cup of coffee. "You do not owe us anything," she said. He looked at her. "I know. I cannot pay you rent, not yet. I did not ask you to." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Then why?" He shrugged one shoulder. "You looked like someone who needed to rest a while." She blinked, unsure how to answer that. "I will earn my place," she said finally. Quinn stood and poured another cup of coffee. He set it gently in front of her. "I do not need you to earn anything. Just be yourself. Stay a while if you want." Joanna stared down at the cup, steam curling up from the rim. No one had said anything like that to her in years. Maybe never, She said nothing, but her hand closed slowly around the warm mug. The next morning, she woke to the sound of hammering. She peeked out the window and saw Quinn repairing the back fence. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, breath showing in the morning air. She made them both coffee and carried a cup out to him. He looked surprised. "You did not have to." "I wanted to," she said. He took the cup with a nod. "Thank you." Lily stayed close to her mother's side most days, still quiet, still wary. But after 2 days, she followed Quinn out to feed the chickens. He crouched beside her, showing her how to scatter seed with slow, careful movements. By the end of the week, she laughed. Joanna heard it from the kitchen and froze, a dish in her hand. It was the first sound of joy she had heard from her daughter in months. When Quinn came in later, Joanna was wiping her hands on a cloth. "Thank you," she said softly. He looked at her, confused. "For what?" "For being kind to her." He set his hat on the hook by the door. "She is a good girl." She has not laughed since her father left. Joanna had not meant to say it aloud, but there it was. Quinn nodded. "He left you both." Joanna said nothing for a long moment. Then, "He rode off 2 winters ago, never came back. I waited. I wrote letters, then I stopped." "I am sorry." "I am not," she said. "Not anymore." He did not press her for more. That night she stood at the window and watched the snow fall. Quinn was sitting in a chair by the fire, Lily asleep in a blanket by his feet. He glanced up and caught Joanna watching. She looked away quickly, but he smiled just a little and kept watching her a while longer. By the second week, Joanna had stopped jumping when someone knocked on the door. Lily began drawing pictures with chalk on the barn planks. Quinn fixed a broken window in the spare room without saying a word. One evening, Joanna brought him a bowl of stew and sat beside him on the porch. They ate in silence, the stars shining above them. "I did not expect to end up here," she said finally. "Me neither," he said, "but I am glad we did." He turned to her then, eyes steady. "So am I." She looked down at her hands, then up at him. "You do not ask anything of me." "No," he said, "just to be yourself. And stay a while." Joanna's throat tightened. She reached out slowly and placed her hand over his. He turned his palm and laced their fingers together. Neither of them said a word, but they did not need to. And for the first time in a long, long time, Joanna felt like maybe, just maybe, she was home. The early light filtered through the frost-laced window panes, casting long beams across the wooden floor. Joanna sat cross-legged by the hearth, mending Lily's stocking with a needle so fine it caught even the tiniest thread. Outside, horses moved slow through the snow, their breaths rising like ghosts into the morning air. Quinn's boots sounded at the back door. He stepped into the kitchen, dusted with hay and flurries, his hat in his hands. He nodded once, his eyes finding hers before drifting to the little girl curled up in the rocker with a picture book they'd found in the attic. "Fence held through the night," he said. Joanna adjusted the seam of the stocking. "That's good." He leaned against the doorframe, quiet a moment. "I'll be driving the wagon down to the valley today, trading feed for salt pork and lamp oil. Might be gone past sundown." She looked up from her stitching. "Will you need help loading?" "Already done," she nodded. "Be careful crossing the ridge." He glanced out the window. "Ice is thick this time of year. I'll go slow." She tied off her thread and set the stocking aside. "Do you want me to sit with the horses again while you're gone?" He shook his head. "No need. They're in the north barn. Doors hold tight." Lily looked up from her chair. "Will he bring back oranges?" Quinn crouched beside her. "If the store's got any left, I'll bring you one." "Maybe 2. She grinned, showing her small, uneven teeth. 3. He tapped her nose. "We'll see." By the time the wagon creaked away down the ridge road, the sun had begun to melt the edge of the snowbanks. Joanna stood for a long while at the window, watching the retreating outline of man and horse until it disappeared behind the pines. That afternoon, Joanna carried wood from the stack and filled the bin beside the stove. Lily traced letters in the ash on the hearthstones. The quiet didn't feel so heavy anymore, just wide, like the sky after a storm. She found an old coat in the back closet, heavy wool with a frayed hem, and spent the next hour repairing the lining. It was too large for her, clearly a man's, but she liked the way it wrapped around her shoulders. She didn't wear it, only folded it carefully and laid it across the end of the spare bed. Toward evening, the wind picked up. She lit the oil lamps and pulled Lily close as the windows shivered. The house groaned now and then, but it held. It was full dark by the time she heard the wagon return. She opened the door before he knocked, lantern in hand, breath catching in her throat. Quinn stepped inside, dragging in a rush of cold and the scent of pine. He handed her a small brown paper parcel. She opened it slowly. 3 oranges sat inside, their skin bright and smooth. Joanna blinked, lips parting. "You found them." He didn't smile exactly, but something softer passed over his face. "Wasn't easy. Storekeep had them behind the flour bins." Lily clapped her hands. "You remembered I said I would." Joanna peeled one carefully, the scent filling the room. She passed slices to Lily, then offered one to Quinn. He hesitated, then took it. Their fingers brushed. "Storekeep asked about you," he said. She looked up sharply. "What did you tell him? That you were staying here? That you're no trouble?" Joanna exhaled. "And what did he say?" He sat down at the table, peeling the slice between his fingers. "Said you're braver than most, coming all this way alone." "I didn't feel brave." "Bravery doesn't usually feel like much at all," he said. "Just feels like walking forward when you'd rather lie down." She looked at him across the table. "Is that what you've done? Just kept walking?" He didn't answer right away. The lamplight caught the edge of his jaw, the hollow of his cheek. "Some days. Others I stop and listen to the wind. Try to remember what I'm still doing here." Joanna stood and moved to the stove, her back to him. "Do you ever wish you'd gone somewhere else? Any place but here?" "Most folks don't know what they're looking for," he said. "They move around so much, they forget to look where they're standing." She turned slowly. "And what about you?" He met her eyes. "I might have been waiting for something I didn't know I needed." Joanna didn't speak. Her hands were warm from the stove, her heart louder than it had been in months. Lily had fallen asleep on the rug beside the chair. Orange peel still clutched in one hand. Quinn rose and lifted her gently, carrying her into the spare room. Joanna followed, tucking the blanket around her daughter's shoulders. When they stepped out into the hallway, he paused. "You don't have to keep waiting for someone to tell you you've earned your place," he said. Her throat tightened. "It's hard to stop looking over your shoulder. I know." She reached out and touched the edge of his sleeve just once. "Thank you for the oranges," he nodded. "You're welcome." The wind scratched at the windows again as they stood in the hallway, the lamplight between them. Neither moved to step away. Joanna's voice was quiet. "Will you stay a little while longer?" Quinn searched her face. "I was hoping you'd ask." By early March, the earth softened beneath the snow, and water trickled down from the ridges in thin, silver ribbons. The sharpness in the wind lost its sting, replaced by something gentler that carried the scent of thawing pine and wet soil. The horses moved easier through the pasture now, their coats shedding in patches. Morning light stayed longer in the kitchen. Joanna stepped outside with a pail, her boots sinking slightly into the loosened ground. The barn door stood open, and inside she found Quinn brushing down the bay mare. A low murmur passed between him and the horse, his hand steady along her flank. "She's looking stronger," Joanna said, setting the pail near the trough. "She's carrying," he replied, brushing along the mare's shoulder. "Due by midsummer." Joanna reached out, palm light on the mare's neck. I've never seen a foal born. Quinn dipped his head, a hint of quiet pride in his voice. It's a thing worth witnessing. They come into the world unsure, legs all tangled, but they try anyway. Stand up before they are ready. She stayed beside him a while, the silence between them easy like old wool. When he finished grooming, he turned toward her, brushing the hair from his brow with the back of his wrist. I'm riding out to the far field tomorrow, he said. Fence line's been leaning. Could use a second set of eyes. She blinked at him. You want me to come, if you're willing. I've never mended fence. You don't need to, just walk with me. The next morning, Lily stayed with Mrs. Harrow, the preacher's wife, who lived in the parsonage near the church. Joanna left her with a kiss to the hair and a whispered promise to return before dusk. She met Quinn by the corral where he waited with 2 horses already saddled. The ride out was quiet. They moved through open country, the sun climbing higher with each mile. Joanna rode with her back straight, hands firm on the reins, her skirts tucked carefully beneath her. She did not speak, but she watched everything: the ridge line, the scattered hoofprints, the way Quinn's profile caught the light when he turned toward the horizon. They dismounted at the edge of the southern pasture. The fence leaned in one long curve, posts tilting like old teeth. Quinn unshouldered a coil of wire. Joanna followed him along the line, holding the stakes upright while he worked. You ever think about leaving? She asked after a while. He drove a post deep into the thawed ground. I did once, right after my brother passed. Thought maybe I'd go east, but the thought of cities made my skin itch. She held the next stake steady. I used to want to see Chicago, carriages and gas lamps. Theater. You still want that? I'm not sure anymore. He eyed her as he pulled the wire taut. You don't strike me as someone who belongs to any one place. I used to think that too, but now I'm not so sure that's a good thing. The sun dipped low by the time they finished. They sat side by side on a fallen log, sharing bread and dried apples from a cloth bundle. A hawk circled overhead, its cry sharp in the open sky. Joanna leaned back on her palms. I didn't expect to find quiet here, not the kind that settles inside you. Quinn chewed slowly, nodding once. Most don't stay long enough to feel it. She turned to him. Why did you let us? You didn't know me, you still don't. I knew enough. Which was what? He looked straight ahead, voice even. That you weren't running for the sake of it, that you were tired. And that tired people need stillness more than answers. A breeze stirred through the grass. Joanna closed her eyes a moment, letting it pass over her face. When she opened them, he was watching her. You don't ask much of me, she said. I wouldn't know how. Most men would want something in return. I'm not most men. She studied him, long and careful. No, you're not. They rode back as dusk fell, the horses picking their way along the creek bed. When the house came into view, its windows aglow with lamplight, Joanna felt a weight settle different in her chest, not heavy but full. Lily ran to meet them, her cheeks pink from the cold, hands clutching a drawing. Joanna bent to embrace her, burying her face in her daughter's hair. Quinn stepped back onto the porch, watching them. Joanna lifted her head, eyes finding his. Will you come in for supper? She asked. I'd like that. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep with a blanket tucked around her shoulders and the coals burned low in the stove, Joanna stood at the table, drying tin plates with a rag. Quinn leaned against the doorframe. You rode well today. I was nervous. It didn't show. She set the plate down. I wanted to do right by you. You already do. He crossed the room in 2 slow steps, stopping just beside her. She didn't look up right away, but when she did, his face was close enough that she could see the tiny scar above his brow, the place where sun had darkened the skin at his throat. I never expected to be seen the way you see me, she whispered. You were never hard to see, he said. She reached for his hand, fingers twining with his. Neither of them spoke again that night. They didn't need to. Outside, the thaw continued, slow and certain. Inside, they stood in the stillness they had built together, not with promises or declarations, but with quiet, steadfast care. And in that quiet, something lasting took root. By late March, the ground had dried enough for the river to show its shape again, narrow but swift, threading through the cottonwoods like a seam in the land. The air carried birdsong now, soft and tentative, as if even the robins weren't certain the cold had passed for good. Joanna stood beneath the clothesline, pinning Lily's dress to the rope. A breeze caught the fabric, lifting it gently. Behind her, the sound of a handsaw rose and fell from the shed where Quinn was fitting new shelves. Lily knelt in the dirt nearby, arranging flat stones into a circle. "It's a garden," she explained when Joanna looked over. "For when the snow's all gone." Joanna crouched beside her, brushing hair from the girl's brow. "We'll plant something easy first, lettuce maybe, beans if the soil's kind. I want flowers too, yellow ones." Joanna smiled. "Then we'll find some." Inside the shed, the saw stopped. Quinn emerged, sleeves rolled, with dust clinging to his arms. He paused when he saw them, then walked over slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Fence held through last night's wind," he said. Joanna nodded once. "The chickens stayed quiet too." Not even a peep when the door creaked. He looked toward Lily's stone circle. "You helping your mama make ready for the garden?" Lily nodded solemnly. "It's gonna have food and flowers." "That's a good mix," he said. "You'll bring beauty and supper both." Joanna rose, brushing her palms. "I was thinking of riding into town tomorrow. I could bring back seed if the store has any left." Quinn studied her a moment. "I'll hitch the wagon, go with you," she hesitated. "It's not necessary." "I'd rather," he said simply. They left mid-morning the next day, Lily bundled beside Mrs. Harrow again, who offered her warm bread and a place to draw while they were gone. The wagon ride was quiet at first, the road muddy in stretches but passable. Joanna watched the hills pass. "It's strange," she said. "The way places change shape once you feel safe in them." Quinn kept one hand steady on the reins. "You feel safe now?" She looked over. "I do. And I hadn't realized how much I missed the feeling." He didn't speak, but the corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not with amusement, but with something like understanding. At the store, Joanna asked after seeds while Quinn traded a sack of oats for tobacco and spare nails. The shopkeeper offered her a tin of chamomile along with the seeds, and she took it, unsure why until she imagined the way it would steep in hot water, scenting the air before sleep. On the ride home, the sun was behind them, casting long shadows across the road. Joanna shifted closer on the bench, not for warmth but out of habit. "Were you close to your brother?" she asked. Quinn's jaw worked for a moment. "He was 5 years older, always louder. He filled up a room without meaning to. Folks said I was the quiet one." She glanced sideways. "You still are. I don't mind that anymore." She traced a thumb along the hem of her sleeve. "Did he die in battle?" "No," he said. "He made it through. It was the months after that took him. Winter, fever." She was quiet a moment. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, eyes on the road. "It was a long time ago, but there are mornings when I still half expect him to walk through the door complaining about the coffee." Joanna leaned back, letting the wind tug at her hair. "My mother died when I was 16. I still catch myself planning stories to tell her." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking beneath them. When they reached the house, Quinn lifted the feed sacks from the back, and Joanna carried the paper-wrapped seeds to the kitchen. The light was deep gold now, slanting across the table. She set the seeds down and turned. "I'd like to cook tonight if that's all right." He stopped in the doorway, surprised. "Of course." "I know I don't have to," she added, "but I want to." Quinn nodded. Then I'll mend the tack before supper. We'll both make ourselves useful." She watched him go, then turned to the stove and set water to boil. That night, the three of them shared a meal by lamplight. Lily told a story about a bird she'd seen from the parsonage window, her fork waving with every detail. Joanna laughed softly, her hand resting near Quinn's on the table. After the dishes were done and Lily tucked in, Joanna stepped onto the porch where Quinn stood looking out over the pasture. The moon was low, casting light across the fields, silvering everything. "She slept easy tonight," Joanna said, arms crossed loosely. "She's starting to trust the world again." "She's not the only one," Joanna said. He turned toward her. She stepped closer, voice low. "I don't know what comes next, Quinn. I only know I'm not looking for something different anymore." He reached for her hand, rough palm wrapping around hers. "What comes next is this: more days, more nights, and a place that keeps holding." She leaned into the space between them, resting her head against his shoulder, and he let her. By April, the thaw had worked its way deep into the soil, and the hills beyond the pasture wore a green haze, soft and new. The creek ran fuller now, its voice louder, and the pine trees stood damp and dark after the rains. At the edge of the garden plot, Joanna knelt with her hands sunk into the earth, pressing bean seeds into shallow furrows with quiet care. Behind her, Quinn fitted a new hinge to the chicken yard gate, head bent, his coat tossed over the fence post. He worked without hurry, as if the day offered more time than they needed. "You were right about the soil," she said, brushing dirt from her wrist. "It's rich, better than I expected." "You've got a good eye," he said, straightening. "Knew that when you patched the side of the barn without a second guess." She looked back at him, smiling faintly. "I didn't want the hens catching a draft. You didn't want me falling through the floorboards either." She laughed, low and warm. "That too." He walked over, crouching beside her. "I can bring compost from the east pile tomorrow, help the roots take hold. I'd like that." He ran a thumb along the edge of her wrist just once. "You can feel the season settling in. It's different from the others," she nodded. "Last year I was still moving when spring came. Didn't notice the color of anything." They stood together in the garden until the light shifted, the air cooling just enough to lift the hairs on their arms. Joanna wiped her palms on her apron and turned toward the house. Inside, Lily sat at the table drawing something with a bit of charcoal on scrap paper. She looked up when they entered. "I made a map," she said, holding it up, "of the farm, so I won't ever forget where everything is." Joanna leaned over her shoulder. "You've got the fence, the barn, even the well." "I put the garden here," Lily said, pointing. Quinn nodded, his voice thoughtful. "That's the heart of it, isn't it?" Lily looked at him. "What's the heart?" He met Joanna's eyes a moment, something steady there. "It's where things grow." That night after supper, Joanna stood at the window while Quinn banked the stove. There was no rush to the way they moved, just the quiet rhythm they'd come into together. The wind brushed against the panes, carrying the scent of wet leaves and wood smoke. "I got a letter today," he said, folding his arms. "From my cousin near Bozeman. He's selling off a few head of cattle, says if I want them he'll give me a fair price." Joanna turned from the window. "Are you thinking of expanding?" He nodded. "I've got the pasture for it." "Been thinking of building a second barn off the slope." She stepped closer. "You wouldn't be doing it alone, though." "No," he said. "I wouldn't." She rested her hand on his chest, just over his shirt. "Do you want to build something with me, Quinn?" He covered her hand with his. "I already have been." He kissed her then, slow and certain, the way the sun rises over the mountain, steady, without apology. She kissed him back, fingertips at his jaw, and the stillness around them deepened, like the house itself was holding the moment. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep beneath her quilt and the fire had burned low, Joanna and Quinn sat on the porch wrapped in a single wool blanket, side by side beneath the stars. "You asked me once what comes next," she said. He looked over. "I remember." She turned toward him, her voice sure. "I want to marry you." He didn't blink. "I was going to ask you at the end of the month when the wildflowers bloom near the ridge." "Well," she said, smiling, "we'll still have those. And we'll still have the ridge." He leaned in, brushing his lips against her temple. "There's no part of this I don't want." They married beneath the cottonwoods 2 weeks later, with Lily scattering the first blooms of yellow violet through the grass. Mrs. Harrow stitched the dress, and Quinn wore the same coat he'd worn the day Joanna stepped off the stage. The preacher read the vows with a voice both gentle and firm, and when it came time to speak, Quinn took Joanna's hand and promised her no grand things, only days of work, nights of warmth, and a love that would not yield to storm or silence. Joanna answered with clear eyes, her voice low but unwavering. "We found each other in the quiet, and I'll stay with you in it always." Lily stood between them at the end, her hand in each of theirs. The house changed, little by little. A second barn went up by midsummer, and the foal was born on a bright morning with dew still clinging to the grass. Lily named it Clover and fed it carrots from the edge of her palm. Joanna planted sunflowers along the fence, and they bloomed tall by July. She kept the tin of chamomile on a shelf above the stove, steeping it on cool nights while Quinn read aloud from the old books they found in the attic. They began to gather tools for a schoolhouse in town, where Joanna planned to help teach once autumn came. There were days of hard weather and fences that needed mending, and times when grief still stirred in the quiet, but always there was a hand to hold, a voice to answer, a place to rest. And in the house they built together, with its porch that faced the ridgeline and its windows that caught the morning sun, love took root and stayed. They never left Elkhorn Ridge. They had already arrived.